And we are also recording. Just a few more minutes to trickle everyone, have everyone come in. Welcome, welcome. It is much needed space. So happy to come together again in the symposium with you all. Welcome.
Hey, Veronica, I think the numbers are steady now, so I think it's good for us to begin.
Okay, excellent. Kumusta? Kumusta? Hello, everyone. My name is Veronica Javier, social worker, planner at Scarborough Health Network, adjunct faculty at York University School of Social Work, and founding member of Filipino-Canadian Social Community Workers Network. I want to acknowledge that I am living and working on the territories of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee, and the territorial and the traditional territory of the Wendat. These territories are covered by 3 treaties: Treaty 13, Williams Treaty, and the Dish with One Spoon Treaty. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee peoples that binds us to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in a spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. The dish, or sometimes it is called the bowl, represents what is now Southern Ontario, from the Great Lakes to Quebec, and from Lake Simcoe into the United States. We will all eat out of the dish, all of us that share this territory with only one spoon. This means we have to share the responsibility of ensuring the dish is never empty, which includes taking care of the land and the creatures we share it with. This is a national symposium. Folks are tuning in from all over so-called Canada. We invite you to visit native-land.ca to learn more about the land and the treaties on which you live and work, and Indigenous peoples who have lived on the land since time immemorial. We are all treaty peoples. We invite you to reflect on how you and your relations have arrived on Turtle Island in this generation or generations past as settlers or migrants. We acknowledge our kin Kapwa of African descent whose ancestors were forcibly displaced as part of the transatlantic slave trade, brought against their will and enslaved and exploited on these lands. We invite everyone to turn your gaze inward. As individuals, as social workers, as a community, as a diaspora, how might we both be impacted by and implicated in the historical and ongoing processes of colonization on Turtle Island? What might be our roles in the dismantling and transformation of the settler colonial projects present and alive in social work? What are our responsibilities towards advancing the work for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to actions? We believe that Indigenous sovereignty, Black liberation, Filipino liberation, and the liberation of our kin Kapwa in Palestine, Congo, Sudan, and across the earth are deeply and inextricably interconnected, and we are committed to the struggle towards liberation until all of us are free. We hope that you join us in this work. All right. Now, on behalf of the organizing team behind the Filipino-Canadian Social and Community Workers Network, I am so proud to welcome you all on this first day of our first ever symposium. This event has been several years in the making, and we are so proud that it's finally here. In many ways, it feels like we are welcoming you into our home. So tuloy po kayo, come on in. And in Filipino fashion, this feels probably very intuitive for many of you and for our team. Let's all take off our shoes. Let's get comfortable. I'll give you some chinelas, some slippers to wear. I'll be asking you all of the quintessential, the standard first questions like, did you eat? Hey, Monica, did you eat yet? I want to call Monica to join me here to welcome folks in. Monica.
Hey, Veronica.
There. Monica and I will be giving welcoming remarks together. So Monica, why don't you introduce yourself to folks?
Sure, thanks. Hi, Veronica. Hi, everyone. It's good to see such a great group on a Friday night tonight. I'm Monica. I use she, they pronouns. Currently completing my PhD in social work over at McGill and a lecturer at the University of Manitoba here.
Period.
Oh, sorry. Okay, never mind. Yeah, I'm a lecturer here at University of Manitoba here in Treaty 1 territories in Winnipeg. V, you asked if I ate yet. In a rush from campus to home, I scarfed down some leftover rice and longanisa just so that I didn't have my stomach growling during tonight's event. So I have eaten, and I hope folks in the audience today have also eaten. I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks, Monica. I too needed to make sure I had something in my tummy. So I had a very delicious goat roti. And so that is now my tummy's warm and ready to get on with this wonderful evening. So thanks, Monica, for helping me bring in some folks into the symposium. For those who just came in, I'm Veronica Javier. My pronouns are she and her. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a social worker, planner at Scarborough Health Network, adjunct faculty at York University School of Social Work, and proud founding member of Filipino-Canadian Social Community Workers Network. As we settle into this space, we know there are many, many new names, new faces here. There are longtime friends and supporters too. And I'd like to invite everyone to please introduce themselves in the chat. So share your name, share your pronouns. Some things you can write as part of your intro are listed on the screen there. Please share, as I mentioned, your names and pronouns as well. Where are you calling in from? We'd also love to know where you are studying or working. We definitely want to know, are you a network member? Are you new? Have you been there from the beginning? Have you been there since the middle? And lastly, what brings you here tonight? It's a Friday evening, and so we appreciate so much that you've chosen to spend your night with us in community. If you identify as Filipino, Filipina, Filipinx, and study or work in the social work, social services, or community worker sector here in Canada, we invite you to become a member of our network. If you scan the QR code on this slide, you'll be taken to our membership page on our website. Also, someone on the team will drop the link on the chat too. So I invite everyone here with us to take a few minutes to introduce yourself in the chat. We also invite you to join us on camera. Don't be shy. It'll be so nice to see your faces. I love it. Here we go. Starting the chats in the chat. While we wait for folks to share their introductions, I just want to point your attention to the Zoom gallery. You'll see a handful of people with their cameras on, with snazzy network backgrounds. These beautiful folks are some of the network's organizers, coordinators, and volunteers. Some may also be speaking at different points this weekend. So if you're part of the team, feel free to give a big wave to the audience. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of them via the chat. Okay, let's look now. Has anyone shared yet any of their own introductions? Yep, I see. Oh, it's going so fast and furious. Monica, what's happening in the chat too? What are you seeing?
I see some familiar faces. I see Rochelle is here. I see Dr. Zula's here from University
Annabelle.
of Calgary. Thank you for coming.
Annabelle from McMaster's here. My goodness, it's so fast sometimes I can't even catch it, but that's awesome.
Dr. Maria Socorro over in BC is here. Thank you for joining.
I see Angie. Hi, Angie. And I see Melissa. Oh, Melissa's one of the symposium coordinators. Awesome. Larry. Hello, Larry Soberiano. Hello, Darnell, PhD student and teacher in the social work from Red Deer, Alberta, hailing from Red Deer, Alberta. Jan from University of Regina. All over the country, beautiful, beautiful sight to behold.
I see Ben Kapili there. I saw, I think your daughter, eh? Awesome. Good to see you, Mary. The Sharisa's here from Calgary. Long time no see. Larnie from Nipawa. Thank you for coming.
Mara from Hamilton, Ontario, and MSW student, welcome. Darla from Vancouver, from Pinoy Pride Vancouver Society, BC, from the West Side. Keep those introductions coming. We welcome you all again. Thank you for being here. From across the country. It's beautiful to see. Okay. Keep them coming as we continue, as we roll on with the introductions as part of this symposium. All right, so just to go over what's happening tonight, I'll take a few minutes to share more information about our network and remind everyone about the community guidelines we set out for this gathering. Then I'll pass it off to Monica, who will give us some context about the symposium and tonight's event. And she'll also introduce our invited guest, our keynote speaker, who I'm sure everyone is excited to meet. The keynote will run about 40 to 45 or so minutes, and then we'll have some ample time, about 30 to 40 minutes for discussion and questions. Then I'll come back on the mic again to offer some closing remarks, words of thanks, and give you all bid you all a good night. I hope that all sounds good with you all. All right. So for those of you who may know this, or may not know this, rather, the Filipino social workers, social service workers, and community workers network, because I've been so used to saying the shorthand, which is the Philcan Social and Community Workers Network, was established in 2017, coinciding with the annual conference for Canadian Association for Social Work Education, CASWE, in Toronto. We are a grassroots voluntary group and professional network of Filipino-Filipinx Canadian in social services. Our membership is just over 270 members from the measly, I feel like, I don't know, like 13 members that we started out with. And so we anticipate that we'll hit 300 by the spring, summer. That's amazing. That's 300 people who want to stay in contact across the country, hopefully meet up and continue to engage as a sector, as a community. So back in 2017, 2018, I was part of a small working group of Toronto practitioners who collaborated to develop the first iteration of the network's mission, vision, and values. I think some of those folks are here tonight too, right? I think so. Monica's smiling. I feel like that's about, yeah, all right. So we met in community spaces and agency boardrooms. We all, we had no budget, we had no money. So, everyone chipped in for food, took turns with note taking and facilitation. If they worked somewhere and they could access that space for us for free, because again, we had no budget, no money, they generously allowed us in those spaces. And then we produce what you see now in this slideshow. So our mission is to advocate and bring spotlight on issues affecting Filipinx Canadian communities. Develop a collaborative network of Filipinx Canadian social service professionals, and provide a space for mentorship, professional development, and capacity building. The network's vision is to affect transformative change in the Filipinx Canadian communities and increase visibility and representation of Filipinx Canadians in Canadian society. Our values include anti-oppression practice, open communication, transparency, honesty, inclusivity, respectability, accountability, and self-reflexivity. That's social work, self-reflexivity. This spring, our network will celebrate its 8th year since inception. Time flies, honestly. Our hope is to return to the mission, vision, and values, and in light of our growth and developments, and see if we can adapt adapt to the changing times and reflect this in the national membership as well. If that is a vision that works and excites you, we encourage you to join us in that development work and sign up and become part of our member. So what have we been up to? Look at the, oh my God, 8 years ago, some of these pictures, geez. I'm just seeing these pictures just today. That's why I'm having you're seeing a live reaction. So these are some of the pictures from our very first gathering in Toronto, in OISE University of Toronto, where I met Monica and Fritz and Ilian for the very first time. It was such an amazing gathering. And so since then, we've embarked on several activities across the years. For example, in June 2020, we did a practitioners forum on addressing anti-Black racism. In May 2020, we did a COVID-19 practitioners community check-in. In July 2022, we conducted a mental health practitioners panel. In October 2022, we held a hospitality and service industries education on sexual harassment. And we've had continuing presentations and gatherings throughout CAS Week conferences. And we've even secured funding from SSHRC and produced a podcast series that Monica will get into. We organize and support regional and national activities. This includes events and activities for practitioners, collaborations with community groups and organizations, as well as advocacy. So we've supported organizations like Kababayan Multicultural Center in their work. We've done some successful advocacy in recognizing June as Filipino Heritage Month in Ontario, organizing a mentorship session in Toronto, and we were also participating in another SSHRC-funded national project with T, and this project around anti-Asian racism. So we've done so much. Like I could really outline everything, but I'm not the keynote speaker, and there's there's much more to it. So what I will say is if you want to learn more about the work we've done and who we are, visit our website at filcanscw.ca. And these are just the ongoing photos from more of our events that we have done. All the CAS Week, look at that. Beautiful faces, beautiful people. Okay, so the organizing team has put forward a set of community guidelines for our gathering that was shared with you all when you registered. Today, I want to reiterate these community guidelines again to reinforce the respect that we will show one another throughout the symposium. We are all kapwa in this space, meaning we will support one another with the utmost respect and generosity, embodying the belief that by welcoming one another into our home, we acknowledge the social ties that bind us and strengthen us in our work, in our community work. Thank you for this time with me in this introduction part. I will pass the baton to my co-host, Monica. Monica.
Thanks so much, Veronica. So next slide, please. I want to just offer a little bit of context for the symposium. So along with Veronica and Dr. Fritz Pino and Dr. Ilian Ferrer and myself, the four of us started discussing a desire for a conference gathering actually before the pandemic. But when COVID-19 hit, it really pushed us to think differently about how we might gather. At that time, we really wanted to meet in person, and because we couldn't meet in person, we had to really think through what ways can we engage with the network, with practitioners across the country, with students across the country, virtually instead. And so it took us some time to move from that in-person gathering to an idea that we presented as this. So you could see on the slide, there's a grant application that was successful. We called it Kwentuhan, or storytelling, with Filipino-Canadian social work practitioners, scholars, and students, a knowledge mobilization podcast and outreach project. For those of you who know the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, SSHRC, the SSHRC Connection Grant usually funds about $25,000. We reached for the stars and asked for double, asked for almost $50,000 and basically got it. This particular project is helping to fund this initiative today. So just in terms of social work practice skills, the four of us put our minds together to utilize our grant writing skills. We rethought and thought about community organizing and outreach at the local level, at the provincial level, at the national level. And it really helped us, I think, to conceptualize a multi-pronged initiative, which this symposium is part of. Next slide, please. So as part of this Kwentuhan project, the first round of activities was a development of our podcast project. So if you haven't seen it already on Spotify and our website, you can look up our podcast called Tayo Na. And just here you can see a handful of our season themes there on the left. And then to the right, all those pictures of many of the speakers who are listed there are also in the room. I think I saw Surjan. I think I saw Atishela. And so if you're interested in hearing more about Filipino-Canadian practitioner stories, maybe their research, some histories about mobilizing in the community. I think Tita Nora is here. She's also a speaker. The podcast is one opportunity for us to gather knowledge in our community and help archive social work practice, community practice from our community. And so we really focus on oral sharing or oral storytelling as a natural way we exchange knowledge amongst each other. And so take a listen on Spotify and feel free to like us or subscribe to us as we're hoping that this project continues with our next grant. Transitioning now, we'll just move to the next slide. Okay. So as part of this Kwentuhan project, we have tonight's keynote, which is kicking off our 3-day conference. Tomorrow is a series of research panels from Filipino-Canadian scholars from all stages, from recent MSW grads, current PhD students and PhD candidates, recent grads, and tenure track professors. And so if you want to hear a little bit about what some folks in the community are thinking about and theorizing about and are studying, we encourage you to go to our session tomorrow. And then on Sunday, we have a participatory day, a day full of interactive activities, a guided wellness or a guided meditation session, a national dialogue session with practitioners, and an art space activity led by one of our coordinators, Esther, who's here in the audience today. And just to wrap up the Kwentuhan project, we're about to wrap it up in just about a couple months' time. Our next step after the symposium is to conduct some focus groups with practitioners in the community to get a better sense of needs and concerns. We're hoping to identify some next steps for our network work and some of our practice work, research work, organizing work. And so we're excited that hopefully many of you here will participate in that process. The next slide. I think we're going to talk a little bit, I'm just going to talk a little bit about logistics before I jump into the introduction of the keynote and the speaker. So in case you are a practicing social worker and you'd like to use this time at the conference towards your continuing professional development, we can issue you a certificate for participation. If that interests you, please email us at our network email. It's here on the slide. It's also, I think, available on our website, but also as part of your registration, you've gotten emails from us. So feel free to send us a note if you need a certificate. And at the end of each day or at the end of each activity, we have an event evaluation. So during the Q&A tonight, we'll drop a link to our evaluation for tonight. We'd love to get your feedback and to make it a bit enticing for folks or as an incentive, we have a raffle for $20 cash if you're able to submit an evaluation tonight. So be on the lookout for that link and hopefully you can share your thoughts and suggestions. Next slide, please. Yeah, and then just quickly, in case, I think everyone's used to Zoom, but if you're not familiar, we're encouraging you to participate throughout tonight's session. So some of that, if you need some guidance on the buttons on Zoom, you can write to the chat. I think many folks have done that so far. You can use the react button to send little emojis. If you have a question directed to our keynote speaker today, Dr. Senator Wanda Thomas Bernard, please use the Q&A function. That will help us distinguish between the chatter and the banter in our chat. We want to just have a separate space for the questions that we'd like to raise to the Senator. And then if you need captioning, there's the buttons there for showing captions or hiding captions too. All right. Now we can move, and I'll move through the next few slides a little quickly, as I know that folks are waiting to hear from Senator Bernard. So next slide, please. So some context for this keynote. Some of you might wonder, for a Filipino-Canadian social work conference, why don't we have a Filipino-Canadian scholar as our keynote? So as someone behind the scenes, we really wanted to use today as an opportunity, one, to invite someone who's been a key mentor to us behind the scenes, but we also wanted to acknowledge some of the scholarly influences that are guiding our scholarship, guiding our organizing work. And so for us, that has been Black African-Canadian social work scholars. These scholars, like Senator Wanda Thomas Bernard, Dr. Dave S., who's also in the audience, scholars like Dr. Dave S. and Senator Bernard, these scholars really helped pave the way. For me, that meant I was tracing, looking at what other racialized scholars, racialized practitioners have done to organize amongst ourselves and to focus our research on issues facing our respective communities. And so this is what led me and many of us organizing in the network to read the work of our invited keynote speaker, Senator Wanda Thomas Bernard. And these are some of the texts that have influenced me. And so if they're unfamiliar to you, the first two are about the mobilizations of Black social workers in the Nova Scotia context. The third text, Africentric Social Work, a recent publication, really celebrates, I think, a range of scholars putting Africentric social work to work in the Canadian context. So that's really exciting. It's a great text that I've seen in many classrooms. And then a well-known book, Race and Wellbeing. So that's a text that I've also gifted to Black social work PhD students who are coming from the international context and coming to Canada for the first time. So yeah, I'll switch to the next slide. So aside from kind of academic texts, right, I had the great fortune to just not read Senator Bernard's work on paper, right? It wasn't just like a theoretical conceptual engagement on the page. I had the great fortune of meeting the senator back at a conference, a CASB conference in Vancouver. So at that time, I was a mid-year PhD student, a member of the Race Caucus at CASB as one of the few student members of that space. And I had asked the chair at the time, Dr. Shirley Chow, can we mobilize an activity at the conference? And, you know, she was open and she had asked, like, what suggestions do you have? And I said, I think the senator is a keynote speaker. Maybe she might be available for a lunch or a dinner or a meeting. And so Dr. Shirley Chow was able to organize a breakfast gathering for racialized social work students and scholars. And you see those pictures on the left. At that breakfast, I was so excited and nervous to tell the senator, like, I've been reading your work. I've been trying to think about how to mobilize Filipino workers or Filipino practitioners in our community. And she expressed interest and curiosity and was really, you know, excited about emerging work that I was kind of gesturing to. And since then, she's been very accommodating to my requests to engage with me and my kind of academic spaces, whether that was at McGill as a PhD student, also in my work now here at University of Manitoba. So I feel very grounded in, personal relationship with our guest speaker tonight. Next slide. And then she's also supported our network behind the scenes and in public. And so one of the ways that she did recognize the emerging work of the network was a few years ago as part of her public statement at the Senate. You can read it. It's nice to kind of see our network name in the archives. And this was one way that she kind of gave us a shout out. She really acknowledged our work. And so I felt it was like a very proud moment. I think we circulated it in our networks. It's on our website. And we just are really grateful for that acknowledgement on such a public platform. So in case you're interested, you could check our website or check the Government of Canada website for her speech. Next slide. So now we're going to just transition quickly to her talk. So this is what it's called. I'm sure you've all seen it in our email communications. And then if you just go to the next slide, I'll read the senator's bio before passing it off to her. So thanks everyone for the patience just to move through the contextualization about the invitation, why we have the senator here today. So to introduce the senator. In November 2016, Senator Wanda Thomas Bernard became the first African Nova Scotian woman to be appointed to the Senate of Canada. She proudly holds her position in the Red Chamber, representing the province of Nova Scotia, championing issues impacting African Canadians nationally in her work. Senator Bernard is a proud resident of East Preston, where she lives with her husband, George, their daughter, Candace, son-in-law, David, and grandsons, Damon and Gavin. Throughout her social work career, Senator Bernard has maintained a deep dedication to social justice and racial justice. Based on this work and perseverance, she was awarded the Order of Canada in 2005 and the Order of Nova Scotia in 2014. After practicing frontline social work in Nova Scotia, and founding the Association of Black Social Workers in 1979, Senator Bernard became a professor at the Dalhousie School of Social Work in 1990, where she subsequently held the position of director for 10 years. During her time at Dalhousie, Senator Bernard developed the curriculum for the Africentric social work course. In 2016, she was appointed Special Advisor on Diversity and Inclusiveness at Dalhousie University and is the first African Nova Scotian to hold a tenure-track position. In 2017, Senator Bernard was the first African Canadian to be appointed Professor Emeritus in the School of Social Work at Dalhousie University, the first woman within the School of Social Work to achieve that appointment. In recognition for her work to advance diversity and inclusion through leadership, activism, research, and community efforts, Senator Bernard was awarded the Frank McKenna Award for Leadership in Public Policy in 2021. Senator Bernard has continued to enact social justice and fight for racial justice in the Senate. Senator Bernard is the Deputy Chair of the Senate Standing Committee on Human Rights, and she also serves as the Deputy Chair of the Senate Standing Committee on Social Affairs, Science, and Technology. She's proud to be a member of the Progressive Senate Group and a founding member of the African Canadian Senate Group. So with that, thank you everyone for listening to why we've brought such a amazing and well-accomplished social work leader into our space tonight. Please give a round of either snaps, claps, emojis, chat welcomes to Senator Wanda Thomas Bernard. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Monica. That was, I love the way you set the context for why I'm here as a part of your symposium. It's truly an honor. When I was invited, is everyone hearing me okay? Does it sound good? Thumbs up? Yes? Okay, good. It truly is an honor to be with you and to have been supporting your work since I first met you. And I believe it was in Vancouver in 2019. And so, yes, I've been supporting your development because I believe in what you're doing. And the fact that you're looking at the reality of 300 members sometime this year is truly amazing. So welcome to all of you. I'm joining you from my home in East Preston, Nova Scotia, which is part of Mi'kmaq territory. Delighted to be with you this evening. I know you have the PowerPoint. Yes, so thank you for that. When I was invited to share with you, the idea is to share the lessons learned. So what are the lessons learned over these past 50 years? I think about that, 50 years. Now, so for the young people on the call, let me say this. 50 years in, and I'm still excited about social work. I still get excited about teaching social work. I still get excited about the issues we raise from the social work lens. And in the Senate, I bring that social work voice. I maintain my social work license in Nova Scotia. If you had asked me 50 years ago, would I be here doing this? Absolutely not, but am I glad? Absolutely. So let's go to the next slide. Oh, I'm going to set my timer. Because once I start telling stories, I could go on, and I do want to have time for questions. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about the origins of the Nova Scotia Association of Black Social Workers and my journey over these 50 years. Then I'll talk a bit about some Africentric principles in social work and empowering pathways. How do we create those empowering pathways? And I'm so glad I was able to sort out my tech issues and to hear your opening, because as you're planning for your next steps, and it was wonderful to hear you say, planning for our next grant. What is that next grant going to be? How you engage, applying for 50 for double what the cap typically is for these kinds of things. Good on you. Good on you for doing that. I mean, for me, those are examples of creating empowering pathways. But I'll talk with you about some of the things that we've done here, and I'll talk about critical hope and the approach, the narrative approach to the work and how important that is. And the opening, Veronica, starting with, have you had dinner? Welcome to my home. Take off your shoes. And because this is over a weekend, and because this is on a Friday night, we are in our homes. At least I hope we're in our homes and not in our offices. And it's wonderful. You've created this virtual environment, but making it feel very much like home. And we'll wrap up with Ujima, which is Swahili for collective work and responsibility. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide, please. So I'll talk a bit about the origins of the Association of Black Social Workers. In 1979, so we're in our 46th year, in 1979, 4 of us gathered here. There were a few more Black social workers, not many, but there were a few more, but they wouldn't join. And they wouldn't join because they felt we were too radical. 4 little women, radical. Well, anyway, we formed, and as a body of 4, we represented power. We reflected power. When people saw us, they saw power. Just back in 1979, having 4 of us gather was intimidating. I remember once we were gathering at my office, just like you saying you're gathering at offices, with no money, there's no money, gathering in offices and community spaces. We were gathering in my office. I was running late with an appointment. When I came out, one of my white male colleagues said to me, "What are the 4 of you doing here? Are you planning some sort of uprising?" And 2 things happened in that moment. 2 things happened. Number 1, I recognized the power we had just by gathering. So you have, I'm sure some of you on this call have no idea the power of the collective you have in your Filipino-Canadian Social and Community Workers Network. You can get 300 people together, 20 people together, 10 people together, how many people you have in this symposium. It's amazing. That's that collective power. So I recognized the collective power we had, and I also recognized that it wasn't so safe for us to be meeting in my office. So we stopped meeting in my office. That was our last time to meet in my office. And we started meeting in each other's homes on weekends, evenings. Great sacrifices for our families. You know, most of us, I was the youngest one in the group and had a young child. Oftentimes I was taking her with me to those meetings. So at great sacrifice to our family, we continued to work together for the organization, for the community, because we knew that we had some responsibility for making things better. And a lot of our early work was in child welfare. So we'll go to the next slide, please. So almost half a century later, we in addition to this Nova Scotia group, the impact has really sort of taken off. And we now have an Alberta Association of Black Social Workers and one in Saskatchewan. And there were two separate ones in Ontario that are now coming together to form one. And we're in the process, we've started some national dialogues. And I think, so one of the ways that our group is different than yours, we started in our province of Nova Scotia. So we have that Nova Scotia group that's been going for 45 years. But it's wonderful now to see how we're growing in different parts of the country. And the interest is just taking off like wildfire. And so I think I see some sort of national network beginning to develop. And it's wonderful. And as a senator, you know, I'm really pleased to be able to facilitate that, you know, help move that along. So we'll go to the next slide. So what's my journey in that? In 1979, when I was one of those 4 founding members, my MSW degree was only 2 years old. So I had only been in the field for 2 years. I started my social work career in mental health. And I'll tell you, and I'm sure you have some students on the call this evening, but I felt so ill prepared as a Black social worker and working in mental health. I felt really ill prepared to deal with the racism that I was witnessing in my practice and in the practice of others in that space. My social work degree hadn't prepared me for that. And in fact, and some of you will get a chuckle over this, but when I studied social work, feminism was still in the closet. So, you know, it was after the fact that I came, so in those 2 years following my graduation, feminist social work became much more prominent. And as someone who was, I'm a self-professed lifelong learner, and so I remember soaking up everything I could around feminist social work, but really seeing the limitations in that and not really seeing myself in that. So feminist social work was really important, but it was a pretty white feminism that we were seeing back in those days. And then I came across a book by Dr. Lena Dominelli, Anti-Racist Social Work, and it was like a lifeline. And then 2 years later, I met Maxine Prevost-Shepard, who had moved to Halifax, back home to Halifax from Montreal. And she was the person who really introduced the Association of Black Social Workers. And that really was the beginning of, I would say, my transformation into the social worker that I've become. And so that notion of social change and pushing for social change, those weren't things that I learned as part of my social work degree, but those are things that I learned post-degree. And I continued my association with the School of Social Work because I didn't just walk away criticizing. I remained involved, and there was a committee, what was the committee called? I can't remember, minority groups issues or something like that. But that committee It's now called the Diversity and Equity Committee. So why don't I just stay with that? It wasn't that at the time. But that's a reflection of how language changes over time as well. But as an alumnus, I stayed with that committee and worked with the school to introduce anti-racist social work. And then we realized, wait a second, this is not going to pass. Back in the 1980s, we weren't talking about anti-racist social work. We weren't teaching about anti-racist social work. And although we had this passion to bring it into our programs, we knew that if we called it anti-racist social work, it wouldn't get approval. So we called it cross-cultural issues in social work. And when I was hired in 1990 as the first African Nova Scotian in a tenure track at Dalhousie, and certainly the first in the school, I taught that course. And that course used to be an elective called Minority Groups Issues. We lobbied to have the cross-cultural issues course, and that cross-cultural issues course was taught by myself for the first 5 years as a course in anti-racist social work. But we weren't allowed to call it that. And then when I went, I said I met Dr. Lena Dominelli through her book, Anti-Racist Social Work. And then I had an opportunity to meet her in person. And then I had the opportunity to study with her. And I did my PhD at the University of Sheffield in England, where she was at the time. And it was during that time that I was introduced to Africentric social work. And again, so you see a theme in my work. When I learn something new and exciting that I'm excited about, that I want to bring it to other social workers, bring it into our teaching, bring it into our practice, bring it into a policy development. And so when I returned from England, I got funding to do a research project called Exploring Africentric Perspectives in Social Work. And that research project was so significant in terms of talking with Black social workers in Nova Scotia who, like me, had not had any of this in their social work education. But I wanted to understand, how are cultural practices being built into your social work practice? And that research project was really quite amazing, and it led to the development of the Africentric social work course. The first time it was offered was in 1999. So you can see the timeline. It takes a long time for things move slowly. I always used to say, oh my goodness, things move so slowly in the university, in the academy. From 1995 to 1999 to get that elective approved. Let me tell you though, now that I've been in the Senate for 8 years, I believe that my 30 years in academia prepared me for things moving 20 times slower. It's 20 times slower, if that's even possible. So it is. And so that elective was first offered in 1999. And one of the most wonderful things that's happened. Well, so you, Monica, you mentioned the Africentric social work book. And I think that book has helped us move Africentric social work from the margins closer to the center. We're not at the center yet, but we're getting closer. But a really interesting thing happened at Dalhousie. In 2023, Dalhousie offered the first ever Africentric BSW cohort at Dalhousie University. And I know my good friend and colleague, Dr. Dave S., you said he's on the call this evening. He and I taught in that first term with this group of students. And it's been an incredible journey. And I'm sure you can just imagine, you're trying to, it's like planting a mustard seed. And that mustard seed, I would say, was planted back in 1979. And we're now seeing a tree in 2023. Actually, we have 36 trees. There are 36 students in that cohort, and they have such a commitment. They will be the ones to bring Africentric social work from the margins to the center, because they have this collective. And I'm going to come back to this notion of collective work and responsibility. We'll go to the next slide, please. So for me, the personal also informs the professional. Everything that I do, all the work that I do, and the reason I'm still working is really grounded in my 18-month-old self who's sitting on that chair. And my sister, Valerie, my late sister, Valerie, standing beside me, 2 years older than me. That's our yard in East Preston, Nova Scotia. We grew up in poverty. We grew up in poverty. And when you grow up in poverty, well, for me, growing up in poverty has made me want to break so many cycles. Certainly breaking the cycle of poverty, but also breaking the cycle of unequal access, breaking the cycle of systemic discrimination, breaking the cycle of racism and the impact of that racism, and the impact, that we internalize, how we internalize. Somewhere along the line, I made a commitment to devote my life to not just lifting myself out of poverty, but creating the conditions to address poverty, the systemic and root causes of poverty, creating the conditions to help people help themselves, but also help systems, and also policy, and the right policy. So one of the things that I've been advocating for example, is a guaranteed livable income. I would say one of the greatest disappointments I have of this government, and especially post-COVID, is that they wouldn't move forward with a guaranteed livable income. Although one of the leading candidates for the leadership is now saying they may go ahead with that. Imagine. Might see it happen. I don't need this picture as a reminder. I can still remember the taste, the feel of poverty. But I like the picture because sometimes when people see you in a certain position, like a senator, they put you in a particular box. And I never want to be in a box. I refuse to stay in a box. So, and so that's why I try to make myself very available and accessible. Monica, when you were saying, when you sort of lobbied to invite me, the minute I was invited, I said yes, to speak at that conference in Vancouver. And then there was a young black male student in that space who followed me to Dalhousie, came to Dalhousie to do a master's and then on to a PhD. So, when you plant seeds, you never know how they're going to germinate and grow and develop. So the personal certainly informs our professional work, and how, not just the work we do, but how we do that work, how we engage with people. Relationships really matter. And for me to be so proud of what you're doing as Filipino-Canadian social workers and social service workers really reflects that, the importance of relationship building in our work. So we'll go on to the next slide, please. So what are those principles? So that bringing that Africentric worldview, and the Africentric worldview really challenges the Eurocentric worldview. And I think as you continue to develop your work, you will be bringing forth that Asian worldview to the center of our social work. Ubuntu, the importance of Ubuntu, loosely defined means, you are, therefore I am, therefore you are, sort of really touching on our humanity and relationships and how relationships matter and how we can work together across our differences and finding the things that connect us and unite us. Sankofa, sort of the Sankofa bird is turned backwards, looking backwards, it's sort of go back and fetch it. And the Sankofa highlights how we are standing on the shoulders of our ancestors. The students in the Africentric cohort gave me what do you call it? An affirmation that reads, "The ancestors are moving mountains to see you rise." The ancestors are moving mountains to see you rise. People who've met me, I'm a short woman. But I feel 10 feet tall. I feel 10 feet tall because I stand on the shoulders of my ancestors. My ancestors have been in Nova Scotia since the 1700s. I shouldn't be first in anything. And when I hear my bio and the number of things I've been first in, it's a reminder of how my ancestors didn't have the same opportunities that I have. So I can't afford to squander those opportunities. So that principle is very, very important to the work. And then the final set of principles are the principles of the Nusa Saba or Kwanzaa. And those are principles that were established back in the 60s by African-American Dr. Malana Karenga, who was really trying to find a way to help people deal with the racism that they were experiencing and that was impacting their lives in such negative ways. So for a lot of people, they bring those principles into their everyday work. So we'll go to the next slide. Dr. Est and I developed these practice principles based on Africentric theory, and I think these principles are very helpful. And you may find them useful in your work. So the reference is there, and if it's a book chapter, if people are interested in that book chapter, if you put it in the chat, I can send it to you, and you can certainly share that. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. I want to share again some of some stories. I want to do a little storytelling of pathways and opportunities that we've created through our work in the Association of Black Social Workers. And again, this may spark some ideas for you as you're thinking about what will you do next, what will your next research project be, what will your next funding be for. When we started ABSW in 1979, everything we did was project-based. And it wasn't until 2003 that we received, for the first time, core funding for, wait for it, for one staff. And we thought we had arrived. We had funding for a full-time staff person that we called an outreach social worker. We still have the outreach social work position, but we have a number of other positions now as well. But really, if you could imagine from 1979 to 2003, we were projects and working from the sides of our desk. And I was the only academic. You folks are fortunate in that you have a number of academics working at different institutions, so you have access to funding resources that community just doesn't have. And that's going to help you move forward in very powerful ways. And it's great to see that you've started with this current project. I look forward to checking out your podcast a bit more. So I've already talked about the founding of ABSW in 1979, and we were doing so much work in foster care. But one of the things I really wanted to highlight here was policy. We were able to get policy changes. We were able to change government policy, particularly around the placement of Black children. Black children were being placed in white homes. They were not receiving any kind of culturally responsive care at all. And so on the one hand, we were doing work and trying to provide cultural immersion for those young people, but we knew that wasn't enough. So the practice piece was important, but we also knew that we needed policy change, and we were effective in getting government policy changed. We're a small little group planning an uprising. Another program, and the other thing that we've done, we've often had students do placements with us. And student placements and student research projects, they have been a mainstay of our work. One such program was called Search, and this was, again, developed by one of our long-term members. And that program provided supports for families. When we found these children who were in white foster homes or white adoption homes, our goal wasn't to go and disrupt those families, but we knew we had to help those families. So the Search program was a program for white parents parenting Black children. So parenting in a racialized world is different. And so that program is still going. Veronica Marsman started that program. Black men surviving the 90s. My doctoral research was with Black men, and I did participatory research project in England. I had men in Halifax and men in Sheffield, England. I wanted them to come together. Nobody would give me money for that. So I thought, okay, what am I going to do? They would give me money for a conference. So I did a conference in England called Black Men Surviving the 90s. My group of men who were working with me in Halifax came to the conference. And then they said, look, this was amazing. First time ever a conference focused on Black men and positive things about Black men. We have to do one in Halifax. I had no energy, no time, no money to do a second conference, but we did, and we found the money. They would give us money for a conference. They wouldn't give us money to do the work, but we did the work under the guise of the conference. So you find a way, if they close the door, you find a window to go through. We've done a number of community forums on violence, really trying to break the silence around violence and getting people to talk about it. I've already talked about the first social work course, an Africentric social work in 1999. Out of that course, one of the assignments was a media watch, and 10 students who were part of that course worked with me after that course and created a video called Stop, Look, and Listen. And it was a compilation of some amazing media pieces that they found that looked at different forms of anti-Black racism. That video that we did, that was then used as a training tool, won a Human Rights Award. And so again, you can see how the work sort of can almost take on a life of its own. Because we matter, we had a group of social workers who were working in government, in child welfare and community services, who were experiencing so much racism. They managed to get a manager to listen to them. And they talked about healing, and they contacted me and asked if we would do a healing program. We called it Because We Matter. That program led to the whole department in Nova Scotia now has totally changed the focus of their work from child protection to child and family well-being. So a transformation has happened here. And then I've got a few other things there, but one of the things I want to highlight is the reparations project. And Dr. Dave Est and Dr. Chris Walmsley, who used to be at Thompson Rivers, led the reparations project for us. We did that project with the Canadian Association of Social Workers. And they came up, the exclusion of the Black experience in social work practice in this country is just astounding. And through the reparations project, Dr. Est and Dr. Walmsley were able to highlight those things and came up with a number of recommendations or reparations. And CASW accepted every one of them. They made a commitment that they would make those change. So you see the transformation. We'll go to the next slide. I'm just going to check the time. Yeah, okay. So one of the things that often people ask me, what helps you keep going? What helps you keep going? And I say critical hope. We talk about critical hope in the Race and Wellbeing book, and that book was based on a research project called the Racism, Violence, and Health Project. Dr. S was part of that project as well. But critical hope, we're talking about hopeful actions. It's not sitting around waiting for change to happen, but hopeful actions based on our analysis of a situation. So, you go in, you're aware of a situation, you do an analysis of it, and then you come up with some actions. Being an agent for change. But critical hope is also about finding the strength and the courage to keep going. Realistic optimism I have here, that notion of realistic optimism. I think I'm generally a pessimistic person, so I have to work at being optimistic. And part of that is through that notion of critical hope. And when you're leading change, and the change can't be just what you do in your professional life, there has to be congruency between the professional and the personal. So we'll go to the next slide. So when I reflect on my journey, and I ask the question, where was the critical hope? I would say I have these 4 A's and 4 P's. So that awareness, analysis, and action, and most recently adding accountability. So really helping people go through a space where they can become more aware, do that critical analysis, take action, but then be accountable and hold others accountable for the actions. So it's not just having the policy, it's implementing the policy, for example. Sometimes people think, getting the policy is the most important thing. Putting the policy into practice is equally important. And that's one of my 4 P's. And as I just said, the personal, the professional policy is so important to our work. And I'm discovering more and more, so many of our students almost seem to be afraid of policy. But I think part of the problem is the way we teach policy. We don't teach it in a way that people see themselves in it. And politically, I think social workers are the most unpolitical group. Certainly when I think about the Hill, one of the first things I did when I went to Ottawa was I reached out to CASW and I said, you guys, we have to do better social work. For the past 7 years, we've been doing a social work on the Hill Day in Ottawa, and it's been really, 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 really good. And I think I see the Canadian Association of Social Workers just stepping into that space more forcefully, and that's just wonderful to see that. So the 4 P's and the 4 A's, for me, that's the journey. We'll go to the next slide. And I would add a 5th A, allyship. Can't do this work without allies, and authentic allies. So Monica, you laid it out so nicely when you were setting the context in terms of, me being an ally for you folks. It's just so important to the work. So that connection, the opportunity for collaboration, so how can we work together? When I think about the reparations project, I thought about Dr. Walmsley and Dr. S, 2 retired professors, white male, black male, but I thought working together, I think they can bring a lot to this project, and they did, if you've seen it. And so much about allyship is we talk about relations, and part of relationship is about not just telling the stories, but listening to the stories, appreciating the stories, having people feel brave enough to share their stories. And allyship should always take us to a place where we're engaging in some collective action. So when I heard about the work that you were doing, I didn't have a choice but to support you, because I was just so excited to see you coming along. And anything that we were doing, that we have done, if that can be an inspiration to you, I'm feeling very grateful about that. And I see that as part of our collective action. Part of our collective action is telling our story so that other people can be inspired that mutual inspiration, to be inspired by that. But I'm also inspired by what you're doing. I am truly inspired by what you're doing. We'll go to the next slide. So when I think about that collective work and responsibility, Ujima, so that's one of the 7 Nuzosaba principles, collective work and responsibility, and that's what you're doing in your organization. And as you opened up tonight, you talked about family, Veronica, what the family, you're inviting people into your home, into your family, sharing your space, but it's also about community and family and community, and it's about colleagues. And one of the things that I think is really, really important in our work and social work is students. We always have to be working with that next generation. The next generation. I think it's Angela Davis talks about lift as you climb. And I say, yes, lift as we climb and also lift as we lead. So bringing others along. And I know in this project, you have 3 young students working with you, which again is, that's part of their mentorship and preparing them for the work. I've already talked about allies. Let me speak for a moment about adversaries. And some of you might wonder, why is that there? What is she talking about? Let me tell you. I would say some of my most significant growth as an academic, as a social worker, as a researcher, came from the people who were I set my time. What did I set it for? 35 minutes?
You're still good for time. You're still good for time.
Yes, okay. Some of those folks, the blatant racism that I've endured in my career has made me stronger and more determined. So our adversaries do have a role to play. They truly do. I wish someone had taught me about self-care earlier in my career. But again, I think adversaries help us tune in a little more to self-care. Or at least for me, that's how I've worked with that. I know I have to take better care of myself when I'm preparing for an attack that I know is going to come. And that's okay. I'm ready for it. Bring it on. Bring it on. We'll go to the next slide, please. So the Sankofa, looking back to move forward. So as I've shared this evening, you can see that we've had many successes. And you as you were sharing this evening, I was looking at your slides, Veronica, and I was thinking, yes, you're pausing to celebrate, and that's so important to the journey. Taking the time to celebrate, capturing the moments with photos and messages. I would say that the issues that we're dealing with today are so much more complex. But I hope that we're better prepared to deal with them. We can go deeper with our analysis. I think we have more resources available to us, and so we don't run from it. We embrace it, embrace the challenges, because we'll grow. As I said, we're better positioned, and the journey really continues. The work goes on. We'll go to the next slide, please. So as you're going through your work, and you're already at, what did you say, 8 years? So think about those milestone anniversaries. So your 10th anniversary, make it a big one. But always think about your legacy. So what's the legacy you're going to be leaving? You want to be sponsoring the next generation. You're doing that. So keep doing it. Creating braver spaces. You're doing that. So keep doing it. Spaces like this symposium. Creating the opportunity and space for people to come together. It's so important. Inspiring change. So as you do those focus groups and you gather with your community, and people they'll guide you in terms of what to do next. What's the next big project? What's the next big research project? That inspiration will come from those conversations, and some of that inspiration may come from this symposium this weekend. You're going to be hearing about work that's happening. You'll be hearing about some of the issues that are going on in your community. And at every possible opportunity, you want to instill critical hope. And that critical hope is the actions toward change. We'll go to the next slide. Thank you. Thank you. So we could stop sharing and then move to the Q&A.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Bernard. I'm Fritz here. I think the screen. Okay.
There you
there we
are.
go.
Yes.
I'm Fritz from the Faculty of Social Work, and I'm part of the network as well. Thank you so much for that very, inspiring and meaningful talk tonight. So for the Q&A, we would like to have it sent through our Q&A box, and then I will be able to read it and as well as, share it to Dr. Bernard. Or I may also have to invite the person who sent it to, so they may have the opportunity to, share their questions to you. But before that, I am hoping that Dr. David S. can say hi a little bit since he's here.
I mentioned him so much. There he is.
Well, first of all, thanks for asking me to speak. But first of all, I want to thank my colleague, Dr. Bernard. I learn every time I hear Dr. Bernard speak or present, I learn. And I also like to acknowledge that she mentioned my name at least 3 times, if not 4. I've known Dr. Bernard for probably older than some of you are, but probably close to 30 years. And it's just been a pleasure knowing her, not only professionally, but personally. And we're still doing more work together. So, and as far as Africentric social work is concerned, I think that we've made strides in some faculties and schools of social work, although but we have over 40 schools of social work in Canada, schools and faculties in social work. And the fact that this Africentric course has only been given at 3 tells me that we have a lot of work to do, a long ways to go. And the other thing I've been thinking, because I'm doing a presentation at an anti-Black racism conference that's being held at the University of Calgary. And I've been thinking about this term social justice, and every school and faculty of social work claims to be social justice oriented. And I've concluded that I understand the importance of the term social justice, but for me, when I think about social justice now, it's basically aspirational. It's basically aspirational because the issues, society's issues, some of them have been around for 100 years. So that's why I'm critical when people talk about the mission statement and social justice. And so that's why I've come to the conclusion that for me, social justice is something aspirational. And what I mean by aspirational is something that we need to achieve. And I don't know if we'll ever, so I don't know what social justice is, if we'll ever achieve it. But one of the primary functions of social work is to continuously strive towards that, whatever social justice is. So that's all I want to say. And once again, I thank the network, because I know a lot of you. I know Fritz, I know Monica, I know Ilian. And so thanks. It's a good start. Thank you very much.
Can I jump in?
Yes.
Fritz, is that okay? Yes.
Yeah.
So, Dave, I think I agree with you, and I think that's why I built the accountability piece in.
Yes.
I added that because I was feeling that frustration as well, that we're never getting there. And recently, someone reminded me in November of 2014, I was at an event in Halifax called Racism is Killing Us Softly. And it was just after the Race and Wellbeing book had come out. And I was hosted to talk about that. And I remember saying, I want change now, not 10 years from now. And so someone found that quote that was picked up by the media. Someone found it and basically said to me, so it's 2024, 10 years from when you said that. Where are things? And I felt embarrassed. I felt angry. I was upset because, as you were just saying, I realized that for all we were fighting for, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, it feels like we're still having the same fight.
Yes.
And that's
Well,
very, very frustrating.
Well, one of the things in my talk, I talk about anti-Black racism. And once again, I'm critical of Canadian schools and faculties of social work because the only anti-Black racism course that I'm aware of is offered at the University of Toronto. And I said that George Floyd died 5 years ago this May. We had some momentum, but it seems to me that whatever momentum that we had, it's being waned. And so we've gotta step up and continue to fight. But I'm saying that we have to pass the torch because I'm not going to be around much longer. Like, and I've been at this like you, Wanda, for over 45 years. And so that's why when Ilian first informed me about this network, I was so pleased because the Filipino community needs this network to do the work that's required in order to help us get to however one defines social justice. So thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much, both. I'm just looking at the chat here. I have Dr. Denise McLean Davidson. Maybe Dr. Denise, if you want to have a response on Dr. Wanda's talk or Dr. David's asked, feel free to do so.
No. I would, so let me see, can I unmute? Thank you all for acknowledging me. I am here as a student like others sitting at the feet of the elders who have done this work, enjoying smiling about my own parallel journey as a U.S. scholar and Africentric, Black feminist and womanist work. And I thank you all, like I said, for the blueprint, the Honourable Wanda Thomas Bernard, Doctor, and Dr. Estes. I really do. And I'm just sitting here soaking it up like everybody else at the table. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Denise. So I've got a couple of questions here from the chat. I'm gonna start off with, actually this is coming from Veronica. Veronica asked, you spoke about critical hope, allyship, and Ojima. I see these as tools we can use in our toolbox to combat the current times. Sorry, my Filipino-ness language. So many accents in my mouth is coming up. So we have the Trump and the conservatism. hoping you can speak to any of these tools as a way to respond to these difficult times.
I think we must use all of these tools. We must resist, what's happening south of the border, what's happening here, what's about to happen here. It's quite frightening. And in fact, I thought about taking early retirement from the Senate. I thought, you know what, I've had enough fights with the Liberal government. I'm not sure I can manage with another government. And then I slept on it. I had another thought. And I thought, listen, I've dealt with struggle. And I never ran away, even though people tried to push me out. So I decided I'm staying until my mandatory retirement. I'm going to fight through the next government, whoever that will be. Because, even with a quote unquote progressive government, there have been lots of issues. Lots and lots of issues. So I think, Veronica, we have to use all of those tools. But I think one of the things that's most important for us to keep in mind is the need to be strategic. So knowing when to speak, knowing when to act, knowing where to put your time and your energy, really thinking that through, I think is really, really important. So that's one of the lessons that I've learned over time, the need to be very strategic.
Wow, that's very important. And, just the thought that we unearth some tools, we have the tools that we can invoke from our, you know, own cultural worldview to be able
Yes.
to not just
Yes.
to sustain us in these current times, but also to continue to project our, what we imagined as a future for us and for our next generation.
That's right.
Um,
We've got to work towards that goal. So even though it's aspirational, and the
mhm,
people who are in positions to make decisions, may not be getting to the actions the way we'd want them to, I think, we have a job to do in terms of helping to push them along.
mhm,
And part of that, I think part of that is also us becoming more political. So becoming political advocates, so asking the questions, of our parliamentarians and
mhm.
holding them accountable, not just during elections, right?
Indeed.
Yes, that's our work. Yes.
I have Jessica Tikar here, Dr. Tikar. You can share your question live.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. You were talking about adversaries, and I wanted to know, I had a couple of questions around that. How do you deal with adversaries in a healing way? And then how does self-care strengthen the work that you do?
So let me start with self-care because it's easier. So self-care is going to look different for everyone, but I would say that I would encourage, and especially those of us working in community work, social service work, social work, education, bring some sort of self-care into your daily lives, daily. I think self-care needs to be a daily practice. So whatever that may be for you, one of the things that I've started doing recently that I'm absolutely loving is a daily yoga practice. That works for me. But as I said, self-care is going to look different for everyone, but self-care will help you continue to have the energy to do the work. Social justice work is exhausting. It's physically and mentally and emotionally exhausting. So finding things that will help you, that will help sustain you, that will help you help with healing. So any of those things that will help you. So for each of us, it's going to be different, but I just say do something daily. Do something every day. Now, in terms of dealing with adversaries in a healing way, one of the things that's really helped me with that is to not internalize. Not internalize the negativity, the backlash. I've had people who've actively trashed my work. So not internalizing that and recognizing that, sort of putting that where it belongs. If someone is doing that, they have problems, right? So that will help you deal with all of that. It can be very difficult, and if you allow it, I've worked with too many people who've ended up with very serious health issues because they were internalizing the trauma that they were experiencing in their workplace. When you internalize trauma, it's going to affect you mentally. So I've worked with people who've had mental health breakdowns. It's going to affect you physically. And, I know I've had my own physical health challenges. And I don't think I would have some of those if I had done better self-care in my early years. But I'm trying my best now. So that I like that focus that you've asked about healing. And remember, you're responsible for yourself, not for how someone else treats you or deals with you or responds to you or reacts to you. We can't be responsible for other people. So we're not responsible for their healing, but we are responsible for our own. So what can we do? And I believe institutionally, I encourage institutions to offer self-care practices, normalize them, build them in. Let's build them into our some collective agreements now, for example, have mental health days or personal days. I'm the head of a nonprofit, and we've just established a human resources manual. And we don't pay a lot. We don't have a lot of money. We're a nonprofit. But one of the things we do, every one of our staff is entitled to 5 personal days per year. And that's a lot. When you think about it, when you think, government workers don't have any such thing. So for me, that's an example of institutionalizing self-care, encouraging people. So if you need a half day, mental health day, you have that. You can take that.
Wow, I really love that idea about institutional self-care where we can see self-care being mainstreamed and normalized and embedded within our leadership and governance. So that would be something as one of the aspirations perhaps that we can all pursue. I have a question here from Dr. Rose Zula. Dr. Rose Zula, if you could share your question to the senator.
Good evening, Senator.
Oh,
I am very, very thankful for having this opportunity to learn from everybody. So I'm just going to come in as a learner. I'm wondering, I really like what you spoke about lifting each other up when, when we do this work towards anti-racism, towards addressing anti-racism. And I'm wondering how we can really focus on nourishing our relationships that we have with each other, because, when we do this work in social justice, sometimes it's just like one project, that we only get to see each other, but then, you might meet that person 5 years, 10 years later. And so I think even in my practice as a researcher and a community developer, I'm always wanting to learn from others. How do we focus on growth and nourishment with each other? Thank you.
it takes something that we don't often have enough of, time. Relationship building takes time. That nourishing and supporting takes time. But, when you make a connection with people, you may have 5 years and maybe you don't talk for 5 years, but when you pick up the phone or you text, it's like you talked the day before. So I think it's for me, that's about trust, building trust and being willing. Part of building trust and relationship building is being willing to put ourselves out there. And that can be difficult, especially if we've had experiences where we've been quote unquote burned.
Mm.
So, but especially, I mean, we're in social work, right? So part of our work is to help people heal and grow from those kinds of challenges. And I think for those of us who are working in the field, we have to model that for the people we're working with too. And so that's an example, I think, of what I was saying when I said it can't be just something you do in your professional life. There needs to be that congruency between the personal and the profession.
Thank you.
I don't want to make it sound easy.
Oh, I don't think it's easy either. It's a ongoing work effort.
Yes. But I mean, Dr. Esther and I are both on this call, and I'll tell you, I'm sure we both remember the first time we met. And it was at CASWE on a panel, right, Dave? And we weren't friends. You're on mute, Dave. Dave, you're muted.
Yeah, we met in 1996 in St. Catharines, Ontario, at our National Social Work Conference. In fact, I remember very, very clearly that Dr. Bernard was putting on a workshop or presentation, and I had heard a lot about my colleague. In fact, I read some of her early articles that appeared in the Canadian Social Work Review. And so that's when we met, 1996, and we've become not only colleagues but close personal friends. And Dr. Bernard is absolutely right that we may not talk to each other, time goes by, but when we do, and we also text each other. So it's like, although time has lapsed, based on a relationship, it's just like time hasn't lapsed. But that didn't happen overnight. It took time. It took time, and it took time, but you have to invest in the time to develop those meaningful relationships. Because it's a lot of work, but it pays off, because not only do you have individuals who become colleagues, but they also become friends. And to me, that's a win-win situation.
Mm.
Thank you.
That's so wonderful, because it's also resonates with when we first started the network, we started as friends. We were all friends. We were not even, engaged in academia, or some of us were not. We're just like looking for other Filipino bodies within and
Yes.
social work. And me and Ilian were just thinking about it. And then eventually we kind of like connect with more and more people like after those moments. So the power of friendship cannot be underestimated.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's about breaking the isolation,
Mm-hmm.
We've been where you are, that feeling, that isolation, and so you look for others.
That's
from
true.
Your community. Yes. Mm-hmm.
I have a question here from Dr. Maria Socorro Mangilangoyen. Dr. Nguyen, if you wanna share your question, if you're still here.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
There you are.
Thank you, Dr. Bernard, for sharing your journey. That was awesome and very inspiring. Please share some of your insights on how to align our collective efforts or actions or strivings to the 2015 TRC calls to action, I see a note from Monica. She wants to answer this, I think. But if you have some insights around that on working with Indigenous communities, because we are all settlers here. And so we need to acknowledge that and say that they have been the stewards of the land, and in our efforts towards social justice, we need to be working in partnership or in an alliance or in whatever dynamics that we need to figure out. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, pardon me, I absolutely agree with you. We can't do this work without working with Indigenous people and communities. And I think that's a good lead in to our schools of social work across the country, because I think every school of social work across the country has adopted the calls to action for social work under the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And so in doing that, hopefully that opens up the dialogue for bringing others in the community along.
I don't know if Monica would like to share her thoughts. Monica Bernard?
Yeah, Maria, it was because I'm putting in the Q&A that I'd like Dr. Bernard to answer it live, but I'm happy just to share my 2 cents. So as part of the land acknowledgement or territory acknowledgement from Veronica, right? And we were editing that land acknowledgement at the beginning. Althea was doing some of that crafting behind the scenes. We're trying to really, even in this practitioner network, right? Get people to think critically about not just, reciting a land acknowledgement at the beginning of their programs or at the beginning of a talk, but to think about tangible ways, right? They take up that work. And so I think we're all on different stages of that journey. For my dissertation work, there were folks in the community just saying they're just still wrapping their heads around what it means to be a Filipino settler, let alone jumping to action, right? And so I think I want to recognize that we have a lot of learning to do within our community. I think we're trying to position this network as a space for that learning and for that kind of action work in time. But I also think it's difficult. And so I'm glad for the question, because I think you're posing to us that we really need to think about the tangible ways we work towards those cost actions. So thank you for the question.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I am mindful of time, so I want to pick one question, which is from Darnell Furo. And then I think there was one person here who raised their hand. And then I think as the moderator for tonight, I would have the chance to ask one final and closing question. Thank you. So Darnell?
Thank you, Dr. Pino. Dr. Bernard, thank you for an incredibly insightful keynote speech tonight. And thanks as well to Dr. S, who was graced our program, social program here in Red Deer not too long ago. I've been reflecting on many of the key points that you have shared with us. And as members of a racialized faculty in educational systems, various educational systems, we are not natural embodiments of power. And when we do embody this power, it is often challenged, or at times the systems of power responds by putting us in our place, quote unquote. And as many of you know, this is a very exhausting cycle where hopefulness and optimism can fade away over time. I've been teaching over 8 years, and there are times that I feel very optimistic and times that I'm starting to question whether I'm actually making a difference, or is it still worth the fight or the battle that feels like uphill for a long time. My very practical question is asking for your insight. What is your message for us who are experiencing exhaustion, maybe a degree of burnout, and maybe we're questioning whether the work that we do is still making a difference? Thank you.
It's a tough question. And I'm going to be brutally honest. When I was coming up, and I would say this to students when I was invited in at orientation, I would say, we don't burn out, we can't afford to. we recycle. I was glad to see you smile. That was the intent. So, on the days that I feel like giving up, I remember that I'm 10 feet tall because I'm standing on the shoulders of my ancestors. So, on the days that you feel like giving up, on the days that you feel like walking away, on the days that you feel so upset that you can't go on, do some self-care. That's a sign you need some self-care. Do some self-care, but remind yourself that it's about a bigger picture. It's about a bigger picture. So the self-care piece is important because we have to look after ourselves to be able to keep doing the work. That's why I think I'm advocating for a daily self-care. Because when we do the daily self-care, we don't get into we don't drop into those big holes. Because we can avoid those holes because we're looking after ourselves. And the other thing that I think has helped me over the years is celebrating the little successes, the little wins. So when I was teaching, I would say, look, I'm teaching from this place of social change and social justice. And I used to try to get every student that came into my orbit to embrace it. Then I realized that wasn't happening. And then I decided, you know what? If every year that I teach, if I can get one student who says, you know what, I'm going to become a social justice warrior. If you get just one, that's okay. Just one. So that one email, have you ever had some students email you at the end of a term or at the end of a class and to say something just positive about something you've said? Hold on to those. They mean something in the tenure and promotion process, but I think they mean so much more to us on our journey when we're doing this work, because it is so difficult, because there aren't a lot of institutional supports. And many of us, when we're first in our communities and so on, there's no one there that we can go and sort of hear from. We couldn't have done an event like this 40 years ago. There was no one to do it with, So I think that's why your group wanted to bring me here, because they wanted me to be an inspiration, and I hope that I have been. And there's one saying that I always have: don't give up. Don't give up.
It's so wonderful. That reminds me of the song "Don't Give Up on Us, Baby." Anyway, there is one more hand that was raising. Sharon? Yes?
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I'm so glad I'm here. I feel a part of the group, so thank you for inviting me in. Dr. Wanda, when I was doing my undergrad, and I am a student, social work student at Toronto Metropolitan University, I was thinking, coming across scholars and scholarly journals, and come across a lot of journals, and they were not, how do I say, they were not connecting to me. And then a friend said, why don't you go to Dr. Wanda's social work in the Afrocentric concept, to see what that feels like. And I remember taking up your book, because I borrowed it at the library, and I said, well, yes, this makes more sense to me in terms of what I'm feeling, because here am I going into space, and there's spaces that for me, I don't feel the Afro-Caribbean feelings coming from them. I'm either triggered by the desensitization of the colonial spaces, if you get what I'm trying to say. So moving forward, and I looked at your work in terms of Afrocentricism, and it's not only about talking about it, but it's how we feel, how we move, how we work together. I am wondering, would I be going too far-fetched if I say some of these spaces should also look, depending on the context, like in schools and some other places, should also have a piece of who you are in them, if I'm making myself clear.
Yes, well, I think I understand what you're saying. You're a social work student, and in most of the courses, you don't see yourself or your community. And so it
No,
becomes difficult to even sort of embrace the work and embrace the learning, and that's very difficult.
yeah, the connection is, and I know, like, I went back in and I am so proud of what I see now, the changes that are there in terms of more of expressing my true self and how that plays out as before. So I don't know if further on, because I'm also thinking of a project that I can do, and the project I'm thinking about it like, let me be myself. Let me express and think how I think.
Yes, yes.
So, the disconnection and the connection I'm thinking around. How would that look and feel? And I know it differs. So how would that play out? I guess that's a loaded question. That would be my question. Or asking for advice.
So one of the things that I would suggest, and I often say this to students, try to shape your assignments. For every course you have assignments, and hopefully you have some flexibility. And where you have some flexibility and some choice, try to use your assignments to get to the work that you want to do.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you so much.
It never gets easy.
Yes.
It really doesn't. And you know, I wrote a poem about being invisible recently because it was just so difficult. And maybe Fritz, I know you had one more question you had, and then maybe could I read this poem?
Of course, yeah, because I think some people here are commenting that I started to sing, so let's be with the arts and the creative, and I think
So
those
we
are
did
one of
end,
the
and we'll end with a song.
things. Yes. Go, yeah, your floor.
Want to
Thank you.
ask you a question first, though? And Sharon, I think when I share this, you'll find that helpful, I hope.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, do your work through your assignments, get into, and there's a lot more literature available now, so that's a good thing.
Yes, it is. Yes. And I appreciate my professor, Dr. Denise, because she gives me that opportunity and flexibility to express myself. And she's on the platform too. So I'm grateful.
Good. Very good. Okay.
Thanks.
All right, so I'm gonna weave this question with your poem, perhaps, because my question would be around the future, futurisms. And in one of the work that I have been doing in my scholarly work and with other co-Filipino scholars as well, we're using the arts to think about futurisms, even in fact, Filipino futurisms, how we could weave together artistic or digital technologies to think about the future or even to project ourselves in the future. And perhaps upon sharing to us that beautiful poem tonight, Senator. What would be your message for community organizers, it's for the next generation? And I'm saying this also as someone who identify as Filipinx, as they call it, but as a trans woman and who has not seen, oneself in the movement and within anti-racism, within feminism. But we
Yes.
are here now talking, and I'm thinking about my trans sisters who are being affected by the U.S. Narratives these days, and how as a
Yes.
community we could collectively continue to support each other. So, yeah.
There may be some insight in this poem. I wrote this on one particularly difficult day in Ottawa. This past fall has been the most difficult of the 8 years, because of all of the politicking, partisanship. So I call it being invisible. Trying to find a way to break through the old boys club, which is a white boys club. There's definitely no invite for a Black woman senator, a Black woman who has a critical lens on everything we do, a Black woman who knows intimately the sting of exclusion and invisibility. There are days when that is especially hard. Today is one of those days. Today I did not have the energy to force myself into their orbit. Today I did not have the energy to speak up or speak out about the invisibility or name the exclusion. Today I only had energy for the silent scream. The scream I breathe into existence when I feel brave enough to do so. Today I simply acknowledge that this is our reality. Today I simply acknowledge that I have critical hope that one day a change is going to come. Today, I make myself visible in the space that is welcoming and warm, a buffer against the harsh realities of the spaces I normally occupy. Today, I find renewed hope, despite the invisibility. Today, I remind myself that hope will never be silent. Today, I remind myself that critical hope does not like to be invisible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bernard. And I think as we continue with our symposium for the next day and as well as on the third day, we will all be reminded that hope is there, critical hope is there, and that could be something that we could rely on both in our psyche, in our imaginations, or even when we dream, when we dream. um, Yes, so thank you so much for your presence. You are such a gift to us, and the door that you have opened really, continues and multiplies as we also continue or do our share to open doors for everyone. So thank you. I will.
Dr.
Mm,
Fritz, when we dream together,
mhm.
we dream bigger.
And we sing together while
We
dreaming.
sing together, yes. I
All
wish
right,
you the best. I wish you the best.
thank you. Veronica will provide, behalf of the network, a closing remarks. I'm mindful of
Yeah.
time for everybody. Thank you for all your energy tonight.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wanda Thomas Bernard, for such an inspiring keynote. I continue to invite others to share their remarks as well, their comments. There's so much to say, but first, thank you for the work that you've done to pave the way and the path for our network. And we're so grateful that you joined us here today. I want to say that it resonated with me how the Association of Black Social Workers started with 4 bodies, like you said, and how these bodies represented power, reminding me of the power we have just by gathering. So this is a powerful group right here. It reminded me of our collective power every time we gather. So thank you for that reinforcement. And I appreciate the making visible of the history of critical social work in Canada from the starting point of cross-cultural issues, that naming in social work to the shift in language towards anti-racist social work. That was mind blown hearing it from you, that history. It resonated with me deeply, the importance of connecting and grounding how the personal informs the professional actions. Since the personal is political has been my ongoing mantra that I often discuss with students. So that was a wonderful validation and wonderful to hear from you. So I invite participants too to think about how have you engaged with this within your own reflexive practice. And I really appreciate when you said when they close the door, you find a window, and finding strength in realistic optimism. Again, I challenge the participants today to reflect on how we can navigate innovative and strategic ways. I think that was like the word today, that we can work together and make this work happen with the critical hope that Senator Wanda Thomas Bernard spoke about today. There's so many gems, but these are just some of the ones I wanted to offer up in our space together. And I can't say enough. Thank you again, Dr. Senator Wanda Thomas Bernard, for sharing your story and your wisdom with us today. So grateful for all the wisdom and sharings today. And for Dr. Senator Wanda Thomas Bernard for kicking off day one. Day one done. There's still so much in store. So I hope you can all join us for day 2 and day 3. The coordinators will drop the links in the chat for those who wish to see what day 2 and day 3 looks like and how to register. And so with that, as we close day 1, maraming salamat sa inyong lahat. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And we hope to see you tomorrow. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. Thanks again. Good night.